No one I speak to has a bad word to say about you. What they say is he's too generous. Yeah.
What if I told you this man once beat Roberto Duran? You know, that hands of stone guy who held world championships in 4 different weight classes and had a career spanning 5 decades. But this victory wasn't in some obscure Olympic qualifier or even in a pub basement. It took place in a professional bout in September 1982 when Duran was still only 31 years old, having beaten Sugar Ray Leonard to the welterweight crown just 2 years earlier. The result was so astounding that it secured Ring Magazine's Upset of the Year. So who was this mystery boxer? A man who nullified Duran's attack and consistently stunned him should go down in boxing folklore, right? Sadly for the Jamaican-born Brit, indulgence, substance abuse and a failure to capitalise on talent would consign his name to the annals of forgotten history. Let's explore the chaotic career of the gifted one, then how he achieved the impossible, before examining his cruel and meandering downfall. Please leave a like for this tragic hero.
And he beat Roberto Duran, then he vanished off the face of the earth for a year, and Duran within that same year made about $3 million.
Born on the 20th of June 1954 in Jamaica, Kirkland Christopher Laing faced a battle before he was even delivered. His mother Louise crashed her bicycle while heavily pregnant with Kirkland. He survived but wasn't unscathed.
And you know, it took me to the age of 5 before I could walk properly. And I mean, if you still notice how I walk now, one foot goes north, one foot goes south, like that. I was what we call buffeting, that's another term for handicap, that's how I was born.
Around the age of 12, Kirkland and his family emigrated to Nottingham in the UK, where he swiftly joined the YMCA boxing club. As he attended amateur tournaments throughout the late 1960s, he began to develop his own style, relying on his God-given ability to anticipate his opponent's punches and then counter. He won the junior ABA title in 1971 before winning the senior ABA featherweight title just a year later against the talented Scot Vernon Solis. With 1972 being an Olympic year, Kirkland presumed a spot awaited him.
A few months later, they selected the team now. This was in Munich, 72.
Yeah, 72, yeah.
And then my amateur coach got a letter saying, explaining why I'm a young 17, you know? Young 17, I can't go. And that broke me down, man.
Sadly, Laing had controversially lost to Tommy Wright in a special ABA show just months before the Olympics, sealing his fate. But it wasn't just misfortune holding him back. Laing was ahead of his time in his boxing style, adopting a Muhammad Ali-like hands-down approach. As Oliver Jarrett writes, he kept a wide stance, showing a sixth sense for leaning back to make a punch just miss his chin. Relying on reflex and instinct was effective, but on very rare occasions, his personal radar would fail to track an incoming missile. British boxers at the time kept a high guard while refraining from flashy head movement, so Laing's style was perceived as cocky and unnecessarily careless. Cynics would have their view confirmed. While trying to qualify for the 1974 Commonwealth Games, Laing was caught flush on the chin by Dave Green, extinguishing any chance of making it. Fortunately, he was selected for the England under-21 team for the European Championships in the Soviet Union. He would lose controversially against Yugoslavia's H.O.F Kačar in the semi, but still secured a bronze medal. Allegedly, the judges also didn't like his style. Another problem for Laing was his perceived arrogance. Like Ali, he'd outright state if he felt an opponent lacked skill or was no match for him. Much of British boxing deemed this as blatant disrespect, which the Americans partook in, but not the UK's fighters. Jarrett correctly notes, Kirk had undiluted confidence in his own abilities, allied to an innocence of spirit, which meant his statements came from the heart. He was ultimately too truthful, not media trained, and over the years this would land him in trouble. His lack of discipline was also becoming apparent, having to be dragged out of a girl's bed the morning before the Midlands area finals. Fair enough. Gassed and unwell, he laboured to a close points loss to Peter Morris, ending his amateur career. On the 11th of March 1975, he turned professional, signing with Terry Lawless's prestigious stable in London. Lawless stated that Kirkland has been inclined to treat boxing as a fun thing, and I'm hoping that Maurice Hope will keep him in line. And boy, he did. Both fighters would run 5 or 6 miles before intense sparring and training. Throughout 1975, 76 and early 77, Kirkland would rack up wins, mixing precise jabs with solid hooks and showcasing his signature head movement. But before a bout against Peter Morris in March 1977, Laing completely disappeared, abandoning his training entirely at a ridiculous time. Firstly, Morris would be a tough opponent, not to be overlooked, but secondly, the money available for those outside the heavyweight division was rising exponentially. This was due to Sugar Ray Leonard, the gold winner in the Montreal Olympics, turning professional in February 1977 and making $88,000 off his debut bout. The enthusiasm for other divisions was now clear, and a welterweight like Laing had a chance to make a lot of money now. When Lang's immense talent came up against Morris's pressure and grit, the result was a draw. His lack of training and cardio had come back to bite him. His 12-fight winning streak was now over, and Kirk had been given a serious wake-up call.
And he's an exceptionally talented fighter.
When you say that, do you mean that you can't always get him to train the way you want him to train, or he doesn't come to the gym one day, or what?
Yeah, he misses the gym quite a lot in between, but his dedication's improved tremendously of late.
In the rematch, Laing would stop Morris in the 5th, admitting later that he had trained properly and taken a more aggressive approach, recalling, "I started to hate him, not out of anything personal, but just to get myself going." It evidently paid off. Kirkland was now getting offers to fight in America, with Lawless claiming he had never managed a more gifted boxer. The world was now his oyster, and what would Kirk do? Would he grab the bull by the horns? No, he'd instead disappear for months. Yet when he returned, Kirk would hardly be out of shape and would spar round after round with ease. In September 1978, he would defeat Akil Mitchell in a narrow points decision despite fracturing his hand badly. In April 1979, he would get a British title shot against Henry Riney. Through jabbing and moving, before landing hard rights, Kirkland would come out victorious, becoming British champion after just 16 professional fights. You'd think this would be cause for celebration, but Kirkland's manager, Lawless, was furious, believing the fighter had posed too much and failed to knock out his wounded opponent. The legendary Henry Cooper would write in his boxing column, "Though he is champion, it would seem he isn't too dedicated to training," and admits to being a bit of a playboy. Problems were now beginning to arise behind the scenes. Laing and another boxer, Jimmy Batten, were thrown out of the boxing gym after a heated scuffle, with Charlie Magri later attributing the cause to Kirk making people look silly in sparring. Regardless, Laing would battle through difficult tests in the following months, showcasing a solid chin in a win against Des Morrison, slick skills against Salvo Nucifero, and raw power when confronted by Colin Ward. However, this is where things started to go wrong. What was described as a Muhammad Ali exhibition performance against Colin Jones quickly went south.
It's almost Muhammad Ali exhibition stuff.
3 single left hooks were all that it took to hand Laing his first professional loss. He would later state, "How could I lose to a guy so far below me in terms of skill?" further contributing to the cocky accusations. As Laing had outboxed Jones comprehensively before the stoppage, an instant rematch was unlikely to happen. Consequently, Laing would begin the rebuild, outpointing George Walker before beating the American Curtis Taylor by TKO. One thing consistently holding Laing back was the fact he didn't have much popular support. He wasn't the major power puncher which many responded to, and as Jarrett notes, it was a little too early for the British public to embrace a black fighter with the same unconditional love as a white counterpart. Laing would defeat Joey Singleton in mundane fashion, setting up an eagerly awaited rematch with Colin Jones in April 1981. Similarly to the first encounter, Kirkland dominated the early stages, jabbing and countering effectively. There were some contentious low blow calls against Laing, enabling the crumpled Jones essential time to recover, but then disaster struck.
You see, one of the most astonishing things about it all is that you both came together a year later, almost exactly a year later. Did you think that it was going to all be the same again at this point?
No, impossible. I thought there's no way this man can beat me again. You know?
There it was.
Oh,
Yeah, that was
the shock on my face. I mean,
He's done it again.
Having failed in his quest to regain his British welter title and win the WBC welter belt, Laing would change manager and trainer before outpointing Cliff Gilpin with relative ease. However, he would become unstuck against Guyana's Reggie Ford, putting in an untroubled yet lethargic display before losing a marginal decision. Laing was flabbergasted, but he had self-sabotaged. His career was now in crisis. He would bounce back by stopping Joey Mack in May 1982, but it was still unclear where his career was heading. Yet his perceived weakness would soon lead to his greatest opportunity. After a close points decision loss to Wilfred Benitez in January 1982, Roberto Duran needed to rebuild his career. He would need some suitable cannon fodder to shake off the ring rust. A mediocre club fighter would be no use, as a quick knockout would not give the ex-champion the rounds he needed, nor the public any sort of spectacle. Yet the opponent couldn't have any realistic chance of beating Duran. That would be disastrous. Mickey Duff proposed Laing, and his offer was readily accepted. After all, Laing had lost to Reggie Ford, whose abilities were well known. In Britain, the bout was regarded as a mismatch and greeted with trepidation. None really backed him to win. A BBC radio commentator, Liam Nolan, said, "The Duran-Laing proposed match is another case where one quakes at the potential it holds for tragedy." Those within Lang's team had an entirely different view. His coach Joe Ryan stated, "If Kirk's scared of you, he'll beat you. If he disrespects you, you've got a chance." Duran was the only opponent Kirk ever feared. The further Duran moved through the weight divisions, the more inclined he was to eat and drink heavily between fights. Prior to fighting Laing, he admitted he had entered the training camp at 178 pounds, above even the light heavyweight limit, scoffing that, "The American press is always saying I'm fat." Additionally, Duran's knockout rate had declined, having boxed 58 rounds without scoring a stoppage or knockout. Nevertheless, the ex-champion could still punch, having visibly stunned Leonard with a huge left hook in their first contest. Kirk would finally train properly, undergoing grueling training and sparring sessions at Culverston Gym in Hackney. Laing was in fearsome condition, with both his imagination and nerves fired by the hands of stone. As he stepped onto the flight bound for America, Kirk was just a week and a half from the ultimate test of his body and mind. But in the hours before the matchup, Laing was beginning to feel the pressure.
5 minutes before we go into the ring now, I couldn't feel my knees. I says to my trainer, "Boy, he is Duran in the hands of stone." When you're nervous, it means you're gonna have to survive, you know? And sooner, even before his eye moved, I'm moving. And then I got my confidence slowly but surely.
This was Kirk's biggest moment.
And as all these introductions are made, we look at Kirkland Laing. What must he be thinking? He's fighting a man he knows, at least in the past, was a legend and a two-time champion. Showed no nervousness today, Sal.
As both of us experienced, we were quite surprised how cocky Kirkland Laing is, and maybe that'll help him.
As the bout began, Laing circled clockwise, cautiously sizing up the legend. Duran immediately claimed the center of the ring, seeking to trap his opponent. Kirk found his jabs were landing, as Duran remained upright, providing an easy target. After lunging forward with body shots, Duran managed to land a glancing right cross, yet Kirk moved quickly, snapping out jabs. Suddenly, with little time left in the round, Laing fizzed out a dazzling combination, showcasing real intent. The second round was more tactical, yet Kirk's caution was likely to irritate the American judges, who favoured aggression. In his corner, Mickey Duff would tell Laing, "You can't run without throwing punches. You've got to start throwing some punches. This is not England." Kirk began to find his range with a short left hook, followed by jabs. In the fourth, Duran upped the tempo, landing 2 big overhand rights, but Kirk pushed back in the clinches, before jabbing with accuracy. When the Panamanian hit Laing with his signature left hook, it didn't even faze him. The Brit was gradually backing Duran up into unusual territory. Striding out for the fifth, Kirk jabbed, moved and punched seamlessly, avoiding Duran's impotent attacks. The sixth saw venomous blows exchanged as Kirkland moved around his man, creating unorthodox angles. As the next few rounds passed, the ambition of Kirk's corner increased as they became anxious over relying upon the judges' scorecards. Through rounds 7, 8 and 9, Laing picked off his legendary opponents with choice shots, left uppercuts, right crosses, bolo punches, and effectively bullied Duran. However, Laing was still struggling to drop the legendary boxer. In the final round, after shipping a right cross from Duran, Kirk landed a right of his own, then a better right hook, bringing a slight shudder to the ex-champion's legs.
Grappling here, takes a right hand from Laing, and Duran's knees buckled just a few moments ago. He's pushing forward, not throwing any punches. It's all Laing here in the last round.
When the contest ended, neither man celebrated. Kirk appeared in a state of shock, hardly daring to believe that the judges would give him the verdict over the colossus he had tamed. Of the 30 minutes, it was difficult to find a single minute where Duran fully dominated. The Panamanian knew it too.
I had the fight 98-93 for Kirkland Laing. The winner by a split decision, Kirkland Laing.
Kirk had achieved the seemingly impossible, providing perhaps the greatest performance by a British boxer on overseas soil, in a non-title matchup at least. Kirk's future was abounded with opportunities, with Laing stating, "Believe me, I can beat anybody if I put my mind to it." With rumours of Sugar Ray Leonard's retirement swirling, meaning the WBC and WBA welterweight titles would be vacant, potential bouts against Donald Curry or Milton McCrory were likely. But Laing would find himself leapfrogged by old foe Colin Jones, who'd fight McCrory instead in early 1983 for the WBC crown. Kirk had vanished, to Mickey Duff's immense frustration, disappearing for around 4 months. All manner of tales circulated about where Kirk had gone. Some claimed he'd returned to Jamaica, others believed to have seen him in Scotland, but he'd actually headed to Blyth, near Newcastle, for relaxation. Laing would later admit that after 8 weeks of solid training, with no fight scheduled, he got bored and went off-grid.
And Kirk then vanishes. Well, he doesn't really vanish, he just goes to Hackney, hangs out in his flat and smokes as much dope as possible. And he watches all these things fall apart. For there's another reason, there's another instance, a guy who should be fighting for a world title gets incarcerated. I write about him in the book. And then Kirkland Laing, who's still getting stoned, has to watch as Roberto Duran steps in and wins the world title against Davey Moore at Madison Square Garden and makes a couple of million.
After the Duran triumph, Mickey Duff had said of Laing, "This fighter is going to be champion of the world in 12 months. Yet 364 days later, he was yet to re-enter the ring. But in September 1983, perhaps out of desperation, Laing agreed to fight a 6'2" middleweight named Fred Hutchins. A seriously risky 10-rounder on the undercard of Larry Holmes against Scott Frank appeared like poor matchmaking for Kirk, especially with ring rust thrown in. With Hutchins stalking and pressing throughout the bout, disaster eventually struck.
Good hand by Hutchins. Here's Hutchins putting Laing down. Oh, he went down hard. He hit his head on the canvas.
With his hero Muhammad Ali at ringside, while being outperformed and then spectacularly knocked out, the bout was everything Kirk wished to avoid. To make matters worse, the boxing board suspended his license indefinitely. Returning in the summer of 1984, he'd pick up straightforward wins against Brewster, Maleke and Lamami before venturing to Brisbane, Australia in April 1985. Controversially, he'd lose to Brian Jansen, who deployed a mixture of headbutts and punches at his fallen foe. Kirk would remain down for more than 3 minutes, flatly refusing to resume the contest before the referee awarded the fight to Jansen. The Australian, previously labelled as an example of Aussie sportsmanship, let his feelings be known post-fight.
What was happening is he was getting tired, and the little doggy in there says, "No more."
Do you want to fight him again in 4 weeks?
I'd love to fight him in 2 weeks. You know, because oh, come on, no worries at all.
4 weeks.
4 weeks, you're
4 weeks. I've asked him to fight you in 4 weeks,
yeah.
And he said he wants the KO taken off his record. Right, that's what he wants. I reckon.
What you tell him, to shove it. If he don't get up,
He lie
he
down.
don't
He
get
lie
up.
down.
If
He
he
lie
lies
down.
down,
He lie
he
down.
stays down.
Laing didn't appear too hurt, but Jansen's chilling admissions and conduct made a disqualification not out of the question. Yet it was still frustrating that Kirk didn't continue to ensure victory. After a quick win against Frankie Morrow, Kirk returned to the States to fight Mike Picciotti. Displaying his unique talent, he would win by unanimous decision. The next few years saw him regain the British welter crown from Sylvester Mitty before defending the belt on multiple occasions. But by this point, Kirk was 33 and his motivation was clearly waning. Prior to his win against Rocky Kelly, he refused to train frequently, deeming his opponent a 5-round job and instead heading to a pool club to gamble.
Well, Laing determined to win tonight. He has to, but he also knows his biggest danger isn't always his opponent.
To be honest, nobody beats me because it's more skillful than me, intelligent than me in this boxing ring. They only beat me, I beat myself.
But this was just the tip of the iceberg. In December 1987, Laing gave a personal interview to the Star newspaper, admitting his addiction to drugs. Not only this, he had gotten high prior to both his fights with Colin Jones, meaning he was in the ring with one of the world's most concussive punchers, while stoned. Laing also claimed he had never trained properly aside for Duran, opting to see women and consume narcotics instead. He promised he'd put these on hold for a European title charge against Nino La Rocca in April 1989, yet even sobriety couldn't offset disaster. In what was described as more of a judo or wrestling match, Laing would succumb to Nino La Rocca in Italy. The French referee, Louis Michel, essentially lost control, allowing Rocca to clinch and headbutt his way to the title. The Italian unsurprisingly secured the unanimous decision, while Kirk lamented the unfairness of it all. Deep down he knew his dreams of world titles were gone. The next few years would bring ups and downs for Kirk. He'd win the EBU European welter title, outclassing Antoine Fernandez in May 1990 after having been brutally knocked out by Buck Smith only a few months prior. Yet, in classic Kirkland fashion, he'd squandered the success swiftly, losing an extremely underwhelming bout to Patricio Oliver on the continent. Many of the rounds extended beyond the 3 minutes allocated, while the referee penalised Kirk for marginal offences, making the loss feel even more unjust. 2 months later, Kirk would suffer defeat to Del Bryan before losing to the Canadian Donovan Boucher, thus missing out on the Commonwealth welter title. But behind the scenes, Laing was grieving the recent loss of his baby daughter Jade, alongside battling a drink driving charge. Having retired after the Boucher loss, he'd returned to the ring in February 1993. Beating Hall and Barnett swiftly, he'd fall short against Kevin Lushing, consigning him to playing a bit part on the boxing circuit. He'd retire in November 1994 after being stopped by Glenn Catley.
I know, I'm just gifted. Simple as that, just gifted.
But you reckon you're still the fighter who beat Duran and was British and European champion all those years ago?
I know. I don't kid myself, I'm too intelligent for that. I've been boxing too long for that.
Laing was an excellent father to his son Kea in the years following retirement, but his relationship with Paula sadly broke down. Due to heart complications, she was compelled to move to her hometown in Wales for ongoing operations, and Kirk simply wasn't able to acclimatise to this new setting. In 2001, he was held in a police swoop on alleged crack houses, though he was released with no charges brought against him. Then, in 2003, Steve Bunce tracked the gifted one down, staging an interview in which Laing admitted he had traversed down a dark path in recent years.
Have you ever thought about getting some help? Maybe stopping drinking. You ever thought about it, Kirk? I know you say you missed out on your life because you were boxing, but do you ever think about it now? The older you get, the wiser you get.
I'm gonna pack everything in, get myself together, and get my head straight, and then I'm gonna write a book.
Only a year later, more disaster would strike.
I get a phone call from his partner saying that Kirk's dead. 3 hours later, I get a phone call saying, oh no, he's survived. He'd been pushed off a full-story block of flats on the council estate he lives in Hackney Downs, and he'd survive.
Fortunately, Kirk would recover from his injuries, moving back to Nottingham close to his eldest children. He would sadly pass away on June the 9th, 2021 at the age of just 66 whilst living in a care home. I've made this video to document a largely omitted chapter of British boxing history. Laing was a pioneer in his style, abandoning the rigid high guard stance and boxing with genuine personality. He should be far better known, having secured untold riches from the sweet science, but alas. But now I want to hear what you guys think. What was it that stopped him reaching his potential? Bad management, poor performances, disappearances, substance abuse, the list goes on, or was it simply bad luck? The win against Duran showcased he had the talent to become a world champion, in my view at least. Or are you of the belief that the Duran win was overrated, a flash in the pan which simply featured an overweight former legend? Please leave your comments down below. Also, if you have watched this far, please consider liking and subscribing, it really does mean the most. Thank you to Oliver Jarrett for writing an insane book on The Gifted One, certainly worth a purchase, although it's not being printed anymore, so it costs you about £100, so maybe consider and save up. Also, thank you to Steve Bunce for locating Kirkland Laing over the years. I know this hasn't always been an easy task, and yeah, see you guys soon, cheers, and rest in peace Kirkland Laing.